Welcome. Find a comfortable position and let your body begin to sink into the surface beneath you. Tonight we are going to explore one of the most mysterious things your mind does. Something it has been doing every single night of your life without you ever asking it to. Something scientists have studied for decades and still do not fully understand. We are going to explore the science of dreams. The world you are about to enter as you fall asleep is one of the most extraordinary places in existence. It is built entirely from the materials of your own mind. Your memories, your fears, your longings, your half-forgotten afternoons, assembled each night into something that feels completely real. So close your eyes, take a slow breath, and let the facts carry you gently down. Every human being dreams. Even those who are absolutely certain they never do. The ones who say they never dream are simply not remembering their dreams upon waking, which is an entirely different thing. The dreaming happens regardless, quietly, reliably, every single night of a human life from the very first weeks of existence. In sleep laboratories where brain activity is monitored through the night, every subject without exception shows the electrical signatures of dreaming during certain sleep stages. The experience of dreamlessness is not the absence of dreams, but the absence of memory for them. Your dreaming mind is extraordinarily private in this way. It does its work completely whether or not you ever know about it. Every night you dream, and every night most of it dissolves before morning without a trace. The average person spends approximately 6 years of their entire life dreaming. 6 years of nights spent in worlds assembled by the mind from nothing. 6 years of chases and conversations and landscapes that feel completely solid and then vanish at the first sound of morning. This figure is difficult to fully absorb when encountered as a fact, but considered slowly, it reveals something remarkable about the human experience. A significant portion of every human life, a portion larger than most people spend on any single waking activity, takes place in a state that leaves almost no recoverable record. 6 years of experience that are almost entirely lost. We are creatures who live partly in a world that exists only for us, only at night, and only for as long as sleep lasts. Dreams occur primarily during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, a stage of sleep first identified by researchers Nathaniel Kleitman and Eugene Aserinsky at the University of Chicago in 1953. Before that discovery, sleep was assumed to be a uniform passive state, a simple switching off of consciousness until morning. The identification of REM changed everything. Kleitman was studying infant sleep when Aserinsky, his graduate student, noticed that the eyes of sleeping babies moved in rapid, coordinated bursts beneath their closed lids. They attached electrodes to adult volunteers and confirmed the same phenomenon. When they woke sleepers during these eye movement periods, the subjects almost always reported vivid narrative dreams. The discovery opened an entirely new field of scientific inquiry and transformed the way we understand consciousness, memory, and what the mind does when the world goes dark. During REM sleep, the eyes move rapidly beneath closed lids in brief, coordinated bursts. For decades, researchers assumed these movements corresponded directly to the visual content of the dream, that the eyes were literally following the action, scanning the dream landscape as if watching a film. More recent research has complicated this picture considerably. The eye movements do not track dream content in any consistent or predictable way. They appear instead to reflect something about the neural processes underlying the dream state itself. Patterns of activation in the visual cortex and brainstem that generate the experience of seeing without requiring actual visual input. The dreaming brain creates vision from the inside out, generating light and color and movement from pure neural activity, and the eyes respond to something in that process in ways that are still not entirely understood. The brain during REM sleep is nearly as electrically active as it is during full waking consciousness. If you were to look at the EEG readout of a person in deep REM sleep without knowing what you were looking at, you might assume the person was wide awake and fully engaged with the world. This is why dreams feel so real while they are happening. The brain is not idling. It is running at close to full capacity, generating a complete sensory world from internal resources alone. The visual cortex fires as if light were entering the eyes. The auditory cortex processes sounds that exist nowhere but inside the skull. The motor cortex activates as if the body were genuinely moving through space. Everything the waking brain does to create the experience of reality, the dreaming brain does too, from the inside, in the dark, with the body lying still. A single night of sleep contains between 4 and 6 separate REM cycles, each one growing longer as the night progresses. The first REM period of the night arrives roughly 90 minutes after falling asleep and lasts only about 10 minutes. Brief, shallow, just enough to begin the night's dreaming work. With each subsequent cycle, the REM period extends. The second lasts perhaps 20 minutes, the third 30. By the final cycle of the night, in the hours just before natural waking, the REM period can stretch to a full hour or more. This is why the dreams you remember most vividly are almost always the ones closest to morning. The long, deep REM of the late night is where the most elaborate and narrative dream experiences occur. The architecture of a single night of sleep is far more complex and purposeful than it appears from the outside. Most vivid and story-like dreams occur during REM sleep. But the dreaming mind is not entirely quiet during the other stages. Non-REM dreaming is real but different. Less visual, less narrative, more like a drifting sequence of thoughts or impressions than a fully realized scene. Some researchers describe non-REM dream content as resembling the experience of thinking rather than the experience of watching. It is the difference between a film playing in a darkened theater and a series of half-formed ideas moving through a mind that is nearly but not quite asleep. Both experiences are dreaming, but they feel entirely unlike each other. The transition from one to the other as the night deepens is one of the most gradual and invisible transformations the human mind undergoes. The amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, is highly active during REM sleep, more active in some studies than during ordinary waking life. This is why dreams so frequently carry intense emotional weight even when their content seems entirely ordinary. A dream about a missed bus can feel devastating. A dream about a stranger's smile can fill the chest with inexplicable warmth for hours after waking. The emotional volume of the dreaming mind is turned up, the rational filters that modulate feeling during the day are lowered, and the result is a rawness of experience that waking life rarely produces. The amygdala's heightened activity during dreams is now understood to be part of a crucial nightly process, the reprocessing and regulation of the day's emotional content, running quietly through the night like a program that cleans and organizes while you are away. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thought, logic, and critical self-awareness, is significantly less active during dreaming than during waking life. This single neurological fact explains nearly everything that makes dreams strange. Without the prefrontal cortex running its continuous background check on the plausibility of experience, the dreaming mind accepts everything. You can fly without wings and find it unremarkable. You can be in two places at once and feel no contradiction. A childhood home can open into rooms that never existed, and you walk through them with complete familiarity. People who are dead are simply present, and their presence requires no explanation. The dreaming mind is not irrational. It is simply unmonitored, running without the editorial voice that waking life never turns off. Newborn infants spend approximately 50% of their sleep time in REM. In adults, that figure drops to around 20%. And in premature infants, babies born before their full term, the proportion rises even further to nearly 80% of all sleep time. The pattern points towards something important about what REM sleep is actually for. In the developing brain, REM sleep appears to provide the stimulation necessary for neural growth and the formation of the connections that will eventually become thought, memory, and perception. The dreaming brain of a newborn is not yet dreaming in any meaningful narrative sense. There is too little experience to draw on, but it is doing something equally fundamental. It is building itself, using the electrical activity of REM as the raw material of its own construction. The word dream comes from the Old English drame, and its original meaning has nothing to do with sleep. In the oldest texts where it appears, drame meant joy, music, and the sound of minstrelsy, the noise of celebration, the sound of voices raised in song. The association with the visions of sleep developed slowly over centuries, the meaning shifting and deepening until it absorbed the older sense entirely. But something of the original meaning survived in the way the word is used. To dream of something is still to desire it with a kind of joyful longing. A dream is still associated with beauty and hope rather than simply with unconscious imagery. The language remembers in its own way what the early speakers of English understood, that the experiences of sleep were not merely random neural noise, but something closer to music. Ancient Egyptians believed that dreams were messages sent directly from the gods to the sleeping mind. The boundary between the human world and the divine was thin enough during sleep to allow communication that waking life could not support. They built special temples called dream temples, places where the sick and the troubled could come to sleep in the hope of receiving healing instructions or divine guidance in the night. The practice was called incubation, from the Latin for lying down, and it involved ritual purification, fasting, prayer, and then sleep on a sacred floor or stone, the body made as receptive as possible to whatever the gods might choose to send. Dream priests were employed to interpret what the sleepers reported upon waking, matching the imagery to established meanings in their libraries of sacred symbols. The idea that the sleeping mind could be a channel for something beyond ordinary human knowledge is one of the oldest in human history. The ancient Greeks had a god specifically dedicated to the generation of dreams. Morpheus, whose name meant shape or form, could take the appearance of any human being and step into a dreamer's sleep as a living presence. He was the son of Hypnos, god of sleep, and the nephew of Thanatos, god of death. His two brothers, Phobetor and Phantasos, took other forms, animals and inanimate objects, completing a taxonomy of dream figures that the Greeks recognized in their own dreaming. From Morpheus, we inherited the words morphine and morphology and metamorphosis, all carrying the idea of form, shape, and transformation at their root. The ancients understood intuitively what neuroscience has confirmed, that the dreaming mind is fundamentally a shapeshifter, a maker of forms that have no stable existence outside the sleeping skull. In ancient Mesopotamia, dreams were taken with the seriousness of diplomatic correspondence. Specialist priests called dream priests maintained detailed libraries of dream symbols and their established meanings, accumulated over generations of careful observation and interpretation. A dream was not a private psychological event, but a message requiring professional decoding, as important and as potentially consequential as any other form of divination. The oldest recorded dream in human history appears on a Sumerian clay tablet dating to approximately 2100 BCE. It describes a dream of the king Gudea of Lagash, in which a goddess appeared and instructed him to build a temple. He woke, recorded the dream, and built the temple exactly as instructed. The tablet survives. The dream it records is over 4,000 years old, and yet its content, a commanding presence, a directive that felt undeniable, a building that had to be made, feels entirely recognizable to anyone who has ever woken from a dream that seemed to mean something. Sigmund Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams in 1899, and the world of sleep science has never quite recovered from it. Freud argued that dreams were the royal road to the unconscious, that beneath the surface content of every dream lay a hidden layer of repressed wishes and desires, disguised by a dream work process that transformed their true meaning into something the conscious mind could tolerate. To decode a dream was to find the hidden wish beneath it. The manifest content, what the dream appeared to be about, was a disguise for the latent content, what the dream was really about. Freud's methods were not scientific in the modern sense, and many of his specific interpretations have been discredited. But his central insight, that the dreaming mind is doing meaningful psychological work, and that its productions are worth taking seriously, redirected the entire study of human inner life. Freud's contemporary Carl Jung agreed that dreams were meaningful but disagreed about almost everything else. Where Freud saw disguise, Jung saw direct communication. He believed the unconscious spoke in a symbolic language that was not personal but universal, a vocabulary of images shared across all of humanity regardless of culture or history. He called this shared layer of the mind the collective unconscious, and he called its recurring images archetypes: the shadow, the great mother, the wise old man, the hero, the trickster, appearing in dreams across the world in remarkably consistent forms. Jung's ideas have also been contested scientifically, but they have proven extraordinarily durable in the culture. The archetypes he described appear everywhere, from literary criticism to advertising to the structure of myths that were told around fires long before writing existed to record them. The most commonly reported dream theme across cultures worldwide is being chased. It appears in the dream diaries of people from countries that have no contact with one another, in populations separated by language, religion, geography, and centuries of different history. The pursuer is almost never clearly identified. It is a presence, a threat, a something that must not catch you, and the dreamer is almost never caught. The chase continues in a loop of effort and near escape until the dream ends or shifts to something else. Researchers who study this universal theme connect it to the threat simulation function of dreams, the brain's use of the safe environment of sleep to rehearse the emotional and physical responses to danger. Whether the danger is a predator, a social threat, or a shapeless anxiety about the future, the dreaming mind reduces it to its simplest form and runs the scenario through the night. The second most commonly reported dream experience is falling. The dreamer is on a ledge, a staircase, the edge of something, and then they are not, and the drop that follows carries the particular quality of complete helplessness that no other sensation exactly replicates. At the moment of imagined impact, many dreamers experience a hypnic jerk, a sudden involuntary full-body spasm that startles them awake, heart beating faster, the falling sensation still echoing in the muscles. Hypnic jerks are experienced by approximately 70% of people and are thought to represent a vestigial reflex from an evolutionary past when our ancestors slept in trees. As the body relaxes into sleep and the muscles go soft, the brain receives a signal that may be misinterpreted as falling and fires a catch response, a reflex designed for a world of branches and heights that our bodies still carry in their oldest memory. Flying dreams are among the most universally reported positive dream experiences in human history. They appear across cultures that have never encountered one another, in populations who have no shared mythology about human flight, in children who have not yet been exposed to stories of flying heroes. The sensation reported is remarkably consistent: a buoyancy, a discovery that the ordinary rules of weight have been suspended, a freedom that waking life never provides. Some dreamers fly smoothly and with complete control. Others struggle, losing altitude, fighting for height with an effort that feels muscular and real. The experience has been interpreted in dozens of ways, as a symbol of liberation, of ambition, of the soul's natural state freed from the body's constraints. But its universality suggests something more fundamental than cultural symbolism, something in the human brain, when sufficiently relaxed and sufficiently free of rational oversight, reaches for the sky. Dreams of teeth falling out are reported with remarkable consistency across cultures and across centuries. They appear in Egyptian dream texts, in medieval European folklore, in the collected dream reports of contemporary sleep researchers, and in the search histories of millions of people who wake with the sensation of loose or missing teeth and reach immediately for reassurance. The psychological interpretations are numerous and contested: anxiety about appearance, fear of loss of power, concerns about communication and being heard, and no single explanation has achieved consensus. What is remarkable is simply the universality of the experience itself. Something in the architecture of human dreaming returns again and again to the same image, across all the variations of culture and time and individual experience. The teeth falling out dream is one of the oldest things we share, and no one entirely knows why. The average person forgets 50% of their dream content within 5 minutes of waking. Within 10 minutes, 90% is gone. The loss is not gradual. It is a kind of rapid dissolution, the dream world retreating at the speed of ordinary morning consciousness returning. A dream that felt as real and as significant as anything in waking life can be reduced to a single image, a single emotion, a single color, within the time it takes to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen. The mechanism of this forgetting is not fully understood, but appears related to the low levels of norepinephrine present during REM sleep, a neurotransmitter important for the consolidation of memories. The dreaming brain, in its chemical state, is simply not optimized for remembering its own productions. It creates and it forgets, night after night, building worlds and erasing them before morning. Keeping a dream journal is the most consistently effective method for improving dream recall. The practice requires placing a notebook and pen beside the bed before sleep and writing immediately upon waking, not after getting up, not after checking a phone, not after a few more minutes of lying still. The window is narrow and the dissolution is fast. But the act of writing, practiced consistently, trains the brain to hold on to dream content that it would otherwise release. Over days and weeks, the dreams become easier to catch, the fragments grow longer, the details sharper. Some regular dream journal keepers report eventually remembering multiple complete dreams per night, where before they remembered none. The journal does not change the dreaming. It changes the bridge between the dreaming mind and the waking one, making it just wide enough to carry something across. People who are blind from birth do not have visual dreams. There is no visual cortex activation, no imagery, no light or color or form in the dreams of those who have never seen. But their dreams are not empty. They are fully vivid experiences of touch and sound and smell and taste, the sensory world the dreamer actually inhabits, rendered by the dreaming mind with the same hallucinatory intensity that sighted dreamers give to images. A person blind from birth may dream of music so immediate it seems to come from inside the body, or of a texture so precise under the fingers that waking experience seems flat by comparison, or of a scent that carries an entire landscape inside it. The dreaming brain does not require vision, it requires sensation, and it will use whatever sensory architecture is available to build its nightly world. People who lose their sight after the age of 7 typically retain some visual content in their dreams. The imagery is often the same, the faces and places and light of the sighted world they carry in memory, but it gradually fades over years as those visual memories become less available and less sharp. A person blinded at 30 may dream visually for decades, the dream images slowly losing resolution like photographs left in sunlight. By the time many years have passed, the visual content may have reduced to color and light without specific form. Eventually, for some, it fades to the dark that waking now provides. The dreaming brain is loyal to what it knows. It works with whatever memory offers for as long as memory can sustain it. Deaf people who use sign language as their primary language often dream in sign language. Their hands move beneath the covers as they sleep, making the shapes of words in the dark, signing to people who exist only in the dream. Those who study the neuroscience of language find this deeply significant. It confirms that the dreaming brain does not process language abstractly, but in the specific physical form through which the dreamer has always experienced it. A hearing person dreams in spoken words they hear as sound. A signing person dreams in words they see and feel and make with their hands. The language is different, but the process is identical. The dreaming mind reaches for communication in the only form it has always known and generates it from within, complete and fluent, in the silence of sleep. External stimuli during sleep are frequently incorporated into dream content. A sound from outside the window becomes a crowd in the dream. The pressure of a blanket becomes a hand. The smell of coffee from a kitchen below becomes a market in an unfamiliar city. The sleeping brain does not ignore the signals the body continues to send. It absorbs them and integrates them into whatever story is already running, bending the narrative to accommodate the new information without waking the dreamer. This process is so seamless and so creative that the dreamer rarely notices the join. The alarm clock that has been ringing for 30 seconds appears in the dream as a church bell in a village, or a phone in an empty house, or a voice calling from somewhere just out of sight. The dreaming mind is, among other things, a master improviser. The sensation of thirst during sleep is one of the most elegantly frustrating experiences the dreaming mind can produce. The dreamer is thirsty, genuinely, physically thirsty. And in the dream, they search for water. They find a glass and it is empty. They find a tap and it runs but yields nothing. They drink and remain thirsty. They drink again and again, and the thirst is never resolved. The dreaming mind cannot satisfy a physical need with a dreamed solution. The body requires actual water, which is not available in sleep, and so it loops. The search continues, the frustration builds, the dream circles back to the beginning of the same unsolvable problem. The sleeping brain is doing exactly what it is designed to do, responding to a physical signal with behavioral action. But the action is imaginary and the need is real, and the gap between them cannot be closed from inside the dream. Lucid dreaming is the experience of becoming aware within a dream that one is dreaming while remaining fully asleep and within the dream. It was described by Aristotle, documented in Tibetan Buddhist practice for over 1,000 years, reported by countless individuals across history, but it was not scientifically verified until 1975, when researcher Keith Hearn at the University of Hull communicated with a sleeping lucid dreamer through pre-agreed eye movement signals. The dreamer, Alan Worsley, moved his eyes in the agreed pattern at the moment of becoming lucid inside a dream, producing a signal visible on the EEG that confirmed beyond reasonable doubt that awareness and sleep could coexist simultaneously. The verification changed the status of lucid dreaming from anecdote to established phenomenon and opened decades of research into what the lucid dreaming state might reveal about the nature of consciousness itself. In a lucid dream, the dreamer can often exert varying degrees of conscious control over the dream's content and direction. Some lucid dreamers report being able to fly at will, to change their surroundings, to summon specific people or places, to reshape the narrative of the dream in real time. Others find that control is partial. They can influence the dream but not command it, like steering a river rather than redirecting it entirely. The experience of being conscious within a dream while the body lies asleep is described by those who have experienced it as genuinely unlike anything available in waking life. A combination of absolute freedom and the peculiar physics of the dream world that does not quite obey. Many people who discover lucid dreaming practice it regularly for the rest of their lives, finding in it a space for exploration, creativity, and the confrontation of fears in a context that allows rehearsal without consequence. The most reliable technique for inducing lucid dreams is reality testing, performing regular checks during waking hours to determine whether one is dreaming and carrying that habit into sleep. The checks need to be genuine and repeated, not perfunctory. The standard is to stop at intervals throughout the day, look at one's hands, count the fingers, look away and look back, and seriously ask the question. In dreams, the hands often appear wrong. Too many fingers, blurred edges, shifting details that dissolve under attention. Text read twice in a dream will change between readings. Clocks behave impossibly. The habit of checking, practiced with sincerity during the day, eventually propagates into sleep, and one night the dreamer performs the check from inside a dream, looks at their hands, counts 6 fingers where there should be 5, and the dream cracks open into lucidity. The wake back to bed technique is one of the most effective methods for entering a lucid dream state. It works by exploiting the architecture of the sleep cycle, specifically the concentration of long REM periods in the final hours of the night. The sleeper sets an alarm for 5 to 6 hours after falling asleep, wakes, remains awake and mentally active for 30 to 60 minutes, reading about lucid dreaming, reviewing dream content from earlier in the night, holding the intention to become lucid clearly in mind, and then returns to sleep. The brain, already primed with dream residue and fully loaded with REM pressure from the interrupted cycle, enters REM almost immediately and with unusual intensity. The combination of heightened REM and a freshly focused waking intention creates conditions in which lucid dreaming occurs far more reliably than in an undisturbed sleep. Tibetan Buddhist monks have practiced a form of lucid dreaming called dream yoga for over 1,000 years, and in this tradition, the dream state is not merely interesting but sacred. Dream yoga uses the lucid dream not as a playground, but as a laboratory for the investigation of the nature of mind. The practitioner maintains awareness through the transitions from waking to dreaming, through the dream itself, through the dissolution of the dream, and into the deep sleep beyond. The goal is the recognition that the dream's reality, however vivid, however emotionally compelling, is produced by the mind itself, and that this recognition, fully absorbed, reveals something essential about the nature of waking experience as well. Tibetan teachers have for centuries described the dream state as the best available preparation for the moment of death, when the mind is asked to recognize the nature of the reality it is encountering without the body's orientation to support it. REM, sleep, plays a critical role in emotional memory processing. During REM, the brain replays emotionally significant events from the day, running them through circuits that include the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex in a specific neurochemical environment. What makes this replay therapeutically significant is what is absent during REM. The brain runs its emotional memories in a state low in norepinephrine and cortisol, the stress hormones that made those experiences feel threatening or painful in the first place. The emotional content is reprocessed, the significance is retained, but the raw distress attached to it is gradually reduced. The memory of a difficult conversation is the same memory after a night of REM sleep, but it is held differently, with more distance, with less charge. This is what people mean without knowing the neuroscience when they say that things look different in the morning. People deprived of REM sleep become emotionally dysregulated within days. Without the nightly reprocessing that REM provides, the emotional residue of each day accumulates without being cleared, and the result is a progressive destabilization of mood and perception. REM-deprived subjects in laboratory studies become more reactive to minor frustrations, less able to read the emotional content of other people's facial expressions, and significantly more likely to interpret neutral or ambiguous situations as threatening. The world begins to look more dangerous than it is. Other people begin to seem less trustworthy. Minor setbacks begin to feel catastrophic. The loss of a single night of REM sleep is manageable. The loss of several nights in succession produces a recognizable deterioration that looks, in its profile, very much like the early stages of anxiety disorder. REM sleep is not a luxury the brain indulges when conditions are ideal. It is a maintenance requirement. Sleep paralysis occurs when the brain wakes from REM sleep while the body remains in the muscle paralysis that normally prevents dreamers from acting out their dreams. The person is conscious, aware of the room, the bed, the ceiling above them, but completely unable to move. The paralysis typically lasts between a few seconds and a few minutes, though it can feel much longer. Most episodes end naturally as the brain and body finish synchronizing their states. What makes sleep paralysis genuinely frightening for many people is not the paralysis itself, but what accompanies it. The vivid hallucinations that frequently arise in this state, overlaid on the real room with the full conviction of perception. Something is present that was not there before. Something at the edge of the bed, or in the corner, or sitting on the chest with a weight that makes breathing difficult. Something that feels completely real. The hallucinations that accompany sleep paralysis have generated supernatural explanations in virtually every culture in human history. In Newfoundland, it is the old hag, an ancient woman who sits on the chest of sleepers and steals their breath. In Japan, it is Kanashibari, literally bound in metal, a demon who pins the sleeper to the bed. In Slavic countries, it is the Mora, a spirit who rides sleeping people through the night. In medieval Europe, it was the succubus or incubus, a demon who visited sleepers in the dark. These traditions developed independently in cultures with no contact with one another, using different languages and different mythological frameworks. But the experience they describe is identical. The paralysis, the presence, the weight on the chest, the difficulty breathing. The same neurological event, encountered across all of human history, interpreted through whatever framework the culture provided. Hypnagogic hallucinations occur in the transitional state between waking and sleep, in the moment when consciousness is loosening its grip on the ordinary world, but has not yet let go entirely. They can be visual, geometric patterns, faces, landscapes that appear fully formed behind closed eyes. They can be auditory, voices speaking clearly from a source that does not exist, music that is complete and coherent and stops the moment the sleeper startles awake. They can be tactile, the sensation of a hand placed on the shoulder, a breath on the back of the neck, a falling sensation that arrives without warning. Most hypnagogic experiences last only seconds and are forgotten immediately, but some are sufficiently vivid to remain in memory with the clarity of a real event, and the line between hypnagogic hallucination and remembered dream is not always easy to locate. Approximately 8% of the population experiences sleep paralysis at least once in their lifetime. For most people, it is a single unsettling episode that passes and is not repeated. For a smaller group, it becomes recurrent, arriving with enough regularity to affect their relationship with sleep itself. A reluctance to let go, a watchfulness at the edge of unconsciousness, a tension that works against the very state that would resolve it. Recurrent sleep paralysis is associated with stress, irregular sleep schedules, sleeping on the back, and disrupted REM architecture. It is more common in people with anxiety disorders, in shift workers whose sleep timing changes regularly, and in those recovering from periods of sleep deprivation. The single most effective intervention is simply improving sleep regularity, consistent timing, adequate length, a sleep environment that supports the transitions between states rather than disrupting them. The muscle paralysis of REM sleep, called REM atonia, is not a passive absence of movement, but an active suppression. The brainstem sends specific inhibitory signals to the motor neurons of the spinal cord, actively preventing them from transmitting the movement commands that the dreaming brain is generating. This is why you can dream of running with full muscular effort and wake to find your body completely still. The running is happening in the motor cortex. The commands are being issued, but they are being intercepted before they can reach the muscles. The system is extraordinarily reliable in healthy sleepers, maintaining the paralysis even during the most physically intense dream experiences. Its reliability is, in a very direct sense, the thing that makes dreaming safe. Without it, every night would involve the body acting out whatever the sleeping mind had decided to do. REM sleep behavior disorder occurs when REM atonia fails to engage properly, and the consequences can be dramatic. Sufferers physically act out the content of their dreams while remaining asleep, shouting, punching, kicking, leaping from beds, running into walls, with full physical commitment and no waking awareness that any of this is happening. A person with REM sleep behavior disorder may be in the midst of a dream fight and deliver real blows to a sleeping partner. They may be fleeing something in a dream and run into a door with enough force to injure themselves. Upon waking, they have no memory of any physical activity and are often disbelieving when told what happened. The condition is significant not only because of the immediate safety concerns, but because of what it predicts. REM, sleep behavior disorder, is now understood to be one of the earliest detectable signs of Parkinson's disease, sometimes appearing 15 or 20 years before any other symptom. Dreams almost never contain content that is entirely new. The dreaming brain does not invent from nothing. It assembles from the enormous archive of everything the waking mind has ever experienced, selecting fragments of memory and sensation and emotion and combining them in arrangements that feel novel but are built entirely from existing material. The face of a stranger in a dream is almost always a composite of real faces the dreamer has encountered, assembled from features the waking mind noticed without consciously registering. The locations of dreams are typically combinations of real places, layered and merged and rearranged. The conversations contain words and phrases the dreamer has actually heard. Even the most surreal dream content is constructed from real building blocks. The dreaming mind is not a creator, but an extraordinarily inventive editor, working with the raw footage of a life to produce something that feels, from the inside, entirely original. Paul McCartney reported that the melody for Yesterday, one of the most covered songs in recorded history, came to him complete during a dream. He woke with it fully formed in his head, certain he must have heard it somewhere before, and spent weeks asking musician friends whether they recognized it. When no one did, he accepted that it had come from inside his own sleeping mind and recorded it. The melody that has been performed over 7 million times was never consciously composed. It was received in the particular way that the dreaming mind sometimes delivers to those who are attentive enough to write things down before morning takes them away. McCartney has said that of all the songs he has written, it is the one he feels least responsible for, a gift from a version of himself that only exists at night. The chemist August Kekulé had been working for years on the molecular structure of benzene, a problem that conventional chemistry could not resolve. In 1865, he fell asleep in front of a fire and dreamed of atoms arranging themselves into snaking chains, writhing and linking, until one chain seized its own tail and spun into a ring. He woke with the insight that the benzene molecule was not a chain but a closed ring, a structure that had no precedent in organic chemistry at the time. When Kekule described the dream in a lecture years later, he told his colleagues to learn to dream, to use the sleeping mind as the waking mind uses logic. The discovery that came from his fire dream underlies the entire modern understanding of aromatic chemistry and the countless pharmaceutical applications built upon it. Dmitri Mendeleev had been working for years on the organization of the known chemical elements, looking for the underlying pattern he was certain existed but could not quite locate. In 1869, he reported that the complete arrangement came to him in a dream, all the elements falling into their correct positions in a grid organized by atomic weight and recurring properties. He woke and wrote it down immediately, finding only one correction necessary when he checked it against his waking knowledge. The periodic table of elements, the organizing framework for all of chemistry, arrived in its essential form during sleep. Mendeleev had spent years thinking obsessively about the problem before the dream arrived. The dreaming mind had been given everything it needed and produced the synthesis that the waking mind, working methodically, had not been able to reach. Mary Shelley was 18 years old when she conceived Frankenstein, and she described its origin in a waking dream during a summer of ghost stories at the Villa Diodati near Geneva in 1816. She had spent days unable to produce a story while the others worked. Then, in the half-sleep between waking and dreaming, she saw it, a pale student kneeling beside the assembled thing he had made, horror overtaking him as it stirred. She lay still and let the vision continue, her mind working the hypnagogic material as the dreaming mind works its own. When it ended, she had the core of the novel that would become one of the most influential works of fiction in the English language. She wrote the next morning and kept writing, the dreamed image at the center of everything that followed. Robert Louis Stevenson lived for years with recurrent and vivid dreams, so narrative and complete that he began to think of them as collaborative work. He called these dream workers his brownies, a reference to the helpful Scottish household spirits who performed labor through the night, and he credited them explicitly with generating the central plot of Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He had been searching for a story that could carry his theme of human duality, the respectable surface and the hidden darkness, and the brownies provided it in a dream of a man drinking a potion and transforming before onlookers. Stevenson woke, called for paper, and wrote for 3 days. The first draft of the novella was reportedly completed in less than a week, the dreamed story already so fully formed that it required only the waking mind's craft to become a book. Sleep plays a critical role in motor skill consolidation, a fact that performers, athletes, and surgeons know intuitively even without the research. Skills practiced during the day are not simply stored as they are during sleep. They are refined. The neural pathways involved in the skill are replayed, reorganized, and strengthened during the hours between practice sessions, producing measurable improvement in technique the following morning without any additional conscious work. A musician who struggles with a passage on Tuesday afternoon will frequently find that the passage is easier on Wednesday morning. Not marginally easier, demonstrably, physically easier, the fingers finding the sequence with a fluency that was not there the night before. The improvement happened during sleep, in the dark, while the musician was not thinking about music at all. The hippocampus, the brain's memory consolidation center, replays the day's experiences during non-REM sleep in compressed fast-forward sequences. Events that took minutes or hours to unfold in waking life are replayed in seconds, the key elements extracted and the detail compressed. This replay transfers information from the fragile short-term storage of the hippocampus to the more stable long-term storage of the neocortex, a process that requires sleep to occur efficiently and that explains why sleep deprivation so severely impairs the ability to form new memories. Students who study and then sleep consolidate what they have learned far more effectively than students who study and remain awake for the same period. The test is not taken in the library. It is taken in the hours of sleep that follow, in the replay running silently through the night. During REM sleep, the hippocampus communicates with the neocortex to integrate newly consolidated memories with existing knowledge structures, a process that generates the associative and often unexpected connections characteristic of dreams. Two memories that have never been linked before may find themselves adjacent in a dream, combined in a way that reveals a relationship the waking mind had not considered. The bizarre logic of dreams is not random. It reflects the brain's genuine attempt to find connections between things, running its associative machinery at full power without the rational oversight that would reject most of the combinations as implausible. When those combinations are useful, when the connection is real, even if it arrived through the surreal, the dream has done what it was built to do. Recurring dreams are thought to represent unresolved emotional conflicts or ongoing stressors that the brain returns to repeatedly in search of a resolution that waking life has not provided. The same scenario replays across weeks, months, or years. The exam that cannot be found, the house with rooms that keep appearing, the journey that never arrives at its destination, each iteration varying slightly, but the essential emotional structure remaining constant. The brain is not being repetitive for the sake of it. It is genuinely attempting to process something that resists resolution. When the underlying issue is addressed in waking life, through therapy, through a change in circumstances, through the natural passage of time, the recurring dream frequently stops without any direct intervention. The dream was never about the content. It was about the feeling the content was carrying. Recurring nightmares are particularly associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, and the mechanism is distinct from ordinary emotional processing. In healthy REM sleep, the brain replays emotional memories and strips the distress from them over time. In PTSD, this mechanism appears to fail. The nightmare replays the traumatic content with the original stress hormones intact, re-traumatizing rather than processing. The nightmare is not healing the wound, but reopening it night after night, in a loop that waking life's ordinary coping cannot interrupt. This understanding has led to targeted treatments specifically designed to intervene in the nightmare itself, to reach into the loop and change its structure, rather than treating the waking symptoms alone and hoping the nights improve on their own. Image rehearsal therapy, developed by psychologist Barry Krakow, treats recurring nightmares by having patients consciously rewrite the ending of their nightmare while fully awake. The patient takes the nightmare, changes whatever they choose, the ending, a key element, the nature of the threat, and then mentally rehearses the new version daily for a set period. The rewritten dream, rehearsed with enough repetition and intention, frequently replaces the original nightmare within weeks. The brain, which cannot distinguish between a deeply imagined experience and a remembered one, accepts the rehearsed version as a valid alternative script and substitutes it during sleep. The technique has produced significant reductions in nightmare frequency in clinical studies and requires no medication and no extensive analysis of dream content, only the deliberate act of choosing a different story. Nightmares are most common in children between the ages of 3 and 6, occurring in this age group more frequently than at any other life stage. The nightmares of early childhood are thought to reflect the developmental work of a brain that is rapidly expanding its understanding of the world and encountering concepts, death, separation, danger, the dark, that it does not yet have the cognitive framework to fully process. The monsters under the bed are not failures of imagination, but signs of a working one, a brain testing the edges of its new knowledge in the safe environment of sleep. Parents who take their children's nightmares seriously and help them build new endings, the monster becoming a friend, the dark place becoming familiar, are, without knowing it, applying the same principle that Barry Krakow formalized decades later into clinical therapy. Night terrors are distinct from nightmares in nearly every way that matters. They occur during non-REM deep sleep rather than REM sleep, involve no dream narrative, and leave the person with no memory of the episode whatsoever. The person may sit up, scream, appear to be wide awake with open eyes, and be completely unreachable by comfort or reassurance, because they are neurologically not awake despite appearances and cannot be reached in the ordinary way. Parents who witness their child in a night terror and try to wake them typically find that their attempts are useless and sometimes prolong the episode. The most effective response is simply to ensure the person is physically safe and wait for the episode to pass on its own, which it does, completely and without leaving any trace in the person's memory by morning. Sleepwalking, like night terrors, occurs during non-REM deep sleep rather than REM sleep. The REM atonia that keeps the body still during dreaming has not yet activated at this stage, allowing complex motor behaviors to occur without any accompanying consciousness or memory. Sleepwalkers have been documented performing elaborate actions: cooking meals, navigating stairs, sending coherent emails, driving short distances. While in a state of complete neurological unconsciousness, they do not remember any of it. The behavior can look purposeful from the outside because the motor systems running it are functional. Only the conscious awareness that would normally direct them is absent. The idea that waking a sleepwalker is dangerous is a persistent myth with no factual basis. Waking them causes no harm, though the sleepwalker may be briefly confused and disoriented upon sudden return to consciousness. Dream content is significantly influenced by waking life experiences in a pattern researchers call the day residue effect. Fragments of people, places, conversations, and events from the previous 1 to 2 days appear in dreams with disproportionate frequency, woven into whatever narrative the dreaming mind is constructing that night. The effect is reliable enough that dream researchers can often estimate when a dream occurred within a person's sleep period based on which day's events it incorporates. But the most emotionally significant experiences of a life do not follow this pattern. They appear not immediately, but after a delay of approximately 1 week in a phenomenon called the dream lag effect. The brain apparently requires time to begin processing the most significant material, returning to it not in the immediate aftermath, but after the first wave of waking response has passed. People dream in color. Approximately 80% of reported dreams contain color, and for most dreamers, the colors are vivid and specific rather than vague or washed out. But something interesting emerges when researchers compare dreaming across generations. Older adults who grew up in an era when television and film were exclusively black and white report significantly higher rates of black and white dreaming than younger people who have grown up surrounded by color media. The effect appears to be genuine and lasting. The visual vocabulary of childhood, absorbed from the screens that shaped the early imagination, persists into the dream life of old age. The dreaming mind, when it reaches for what a world looks like, reaches for what it first learned a world looked like. And for some people, that first world was in black and white. Animals dream tea. REM sleep has been identified in all mammals studied in birds and in a growing list of other species, and the behavioral signs during sleep suggest active dream states across the animal kingdom. Dogs twitch, whimper, make running movements, and occasionally growl or bark during sleep. behaviors that correspond precisely to REM sleep periods and are widely understood as the physical expression of dreaming. Cats show similar patterns, their whiskers moving, their paws flexing, their eyes occasionally tracking something behind their closed lids. The question of what a dog or cat experiences during these episodes, whether there is something it is like to be a dreaming dog, cannot be answered from the outside. But the brain activity during those moments is structured in ways that, in humans, we call dreaming without hesitation. Rats have provided some of the most direct evidence that animals dream about specific waking experiences. In studies at MIT, rats were implanted with electrodes that recorded the activity of individual neurons in the hippocampus while the rats ran through mazes during the day. When the same rats entered REM sleep that night, the same neurons fired in the same sequences, at the same relative timing, in the same order as they had during the waking maze run. The correspondence was precise enough that the researchers could identify, from the sleeping brain activity alone, exactly which part of the maze the rat was dreaming about. The rat was running the maze again in its sleep, in a space that existed only inside its skull, with enough neurological fidelity to be decoded from the outside. Octopuses, which are invertebrates and therefore deeply unexpected candidates for dreaming, have been observed cycling through rapid and dramatic color changes during sleep, flashes of yellow, white, brown, and deep red moving across their skin in the patterns they use for camouflage while awake. The changes occur in bursts, last for seconds, and then resolve back to resting coloration before beginning again. Researchers who observed this described it as resembling the rapid eye movements of REM sleep invertebrates, a period of intense internal activity during an otherwise quiescent state. Whether octopuses experience anything during these episodes, whether there is something it is like to be an octopus cycling through its camouflage patterns in the dark of the tank at night, that question remains genuinely open and genuinely fascinating. The content of dreams is more negative than positive on average. Fear, anxiety, and aggression appear more frequently in dream content than joy or contentment, and the emotional tone of the average dream diary is, on balance, darker than the average waking day. This is not a sign of unhappiness in the dreamer, but a reflection of the brain's priorities during sleep. The dreaming mind is doing threat simulation work, rehearsing difficult scenarios, processing unresolved fears, running emotional challenges through the safe environment of the sleeping skull. And this work requires the difficult material more than it requires the comfortable. The pleasant dreams are there too, and they are real. But the brain's overnight agenda tilts toward what needs attention, and what needs attention is rarely what is already fine. The threat simulation theory of dreaming, proposed by neuroscientist Antti Revonsuo, suggests that the primary evolutionary function of dreaming is to rehearse responses to threatening situations in an environment where failure carries no real cost. In this view, the dream is a training ground, a space where the brain can practice being chased, being lost, being in danger, being humiliated, being overwhelmed, without any of those experiences actually happening. The rehearsal strengthens the neural pathways associated with threat response, making the waking organism more capable of handling the situations the dream simulated. From this perspective, the nightmare is not a malfunction but a feature, the most intensive version of the rehearsal, running the hardest scenarios at full intensity to ensure the responses are ready. The default mode network, a set of brain regions that becomes active when the mind is not focused on an external task and turns instead to internal experience, is highly active during dreaming. This is the same network that activates during daydreaming, during mind wandering, during the construction of imagined futures, and the revisiting of remembered pasts. Its high activity during dreams suggests that dreaming is not a fundamentally alien brain state, but a nocturnal intensification of something the waking mind does continuously. the spontaneous generation of internally directed experience, the mind telling itself stories about itself. The dream is the night shift of the default mode network, running the same processes with the same architecture, freed from the interruptions of the external world. Pregnant women report significantly more vivid and anxiety-laden dreams than non-pregnant women, particularly in the third trimester. The content shifts in predictable ways as the pregnancy progresses. Early dreams often focus on the self and on relationships. Later ones increasingly involve the coming child, the birth itself, the possibility of loss. Hormonal changes, physical discomfort that disrupts sleep architecture, and the emotional weight of an approaching life transition all contribute to an intensification of dream life that many pregnant women find both exhausting and revelatory. Midwives and therapists who work with pregnant women report that dream content in the final weeks before birth often processes fears that the waking mind has not fully acknowledged, the dreams doing the emotional preparation work that ordinary consciousness has been deferring. People who score high on measures of creativity and openness to experience report more frequent, more vivid, and more unusual dreams than those who score lower on these traits. The connection is not simply that creative people pay more attention to their dreams, though they may, but that the same cognitive style that produces creative thought in waking life appears to produce more richly associative and less constrained dream content during sleep. The dreaming mind of a person with high openness may make connections and combinations that a more conventional dreaming mind would not produce, following the associative chain further, tolerating more strangeness, generating more genuinely novel arrangements from the same raw material of experience. The dreaming mind, like the waking one, reflects the personality of the person it belongs to. The smell of roses introduced into the sleeping environment during a learning task significantly improved memory consolidation for that task in a remarkable set of experiments. Participants learned a spatial memory task in a room subtly scented with roses, then slept in the same scent. The smell, encountered during sleep, appeared to trigger the replay of the associated memories, the brain using the sensory cue as a retrieval tag to locate and strengthen the specific memories formed in its presence. The technique, called targeted memory reactivation, has since been extended to other types of learning and to other sensory cues, demonstrating that the memory consolidation occurring during sleep can be directed from the outside, that the sleeping brain is not closed to the world but responding to it, even during the depths of the night. The potential applications of targeted memory reactivation extend well beyond studying for exams. Researchers have used the technique to strengthen specific skills, to reduce conditioned fear responses by replaying the neutral version of a feared stimulus during sleep, and in preliminary studies to attempt to alter implicit biases, unconscious attitudes measured by reaction time tests, by pairing them during waking with sounds that were then played back during sleep. The brain, replaying the association during the night, updated the attitude in the direction of the pairing. The sleeping mind is not merely replaying what happened, but actively revising it, integrating, updating, occasionally revising in ways that change how we respond to the world when we wake. Alcohol significantly suppresses REM sleep, and this suppression is one of the least discussed consequences of regular drinking. Alcohol helps many people fall asleep faster, which creates a perception of improved sleep, but it disrupts the sleep architecture that follows in ways that reduce dream time, impair emotional processing, and leave the sleeper less rested than the hours spent in bed would suggest. The first half of the night after drinking is often disproportionately deep non-REM sleep. The second half, as the alcohol is metabolized, shifts toward fragmented and disturbed REM, often producing vivid, unpleasant dreams as the brain attempts to recover the REM time it lost. The hangover that follows is not only a function of dehydration and acetaldehyde, it is also, in part, a function of a brain that did not get the sleep it needed. Antidepressants, particularly SSRIs, the most commonly prescribed class, significantly suppress REM sleep as a side effect that is rarely discussed with patients. Some users report a complete cessation of dreaming during the first weeks of treatment, a dreamless sleep that many find disconcerting after a lifetime of vivid dream experience. Others report that dreaming simply flattens, present but dim, forgettable, without the emotional intensity of undrugged sleep. When SSRIs are discontinued, the suppressed REM returns with force, a phenomenon called REM rebound, producing dreams of unusual vividness and emotional intensity that can persist for weeks. The brain, deprived of its nightly emotional processing for months or years, reclaims the time intensively, as if it has a great deal of work to catch up on. REM rebound is the brain's automatic response to any period of REM deprivation, whether caused by alcohol, medication, sleep restriction, or illness. After even a single night of disrupted REM, the following night shows an increase in the proportion of time spent in REM sleep, with more vivid and narrative-rich dreams as the brain prioritizes the recovery of lost time. After extended periods of REM suppression, the rebound can be dramatic. Night after night of unusually intense dreaming as the system recalibrates. People who stop drinking after long periods of heavy use often experience disturbing and vivid nightmares for weeks during early sobriety. Not a sign that something is wrong, but a sign that the brain's dream machinery, suppressed for so long, is finally running at full capacity again. False awakening is a dream experience in which the dreamer believes with complete conviction that they have woken up and begun their normal morning routine. They get out of bed, dress, make coffee, perhaps step outside into what appears to be an ordinary morning, and then something is wrong. A detail that doesn't fit, a room that opens into another room, a face that belongs to someone who shouldn't be there. The realization arrives gradually or suddenly that the morning was itself a dream, that the waking was false. And then sometimes there is another waking, from the waking dream into what may or may not be the actual morning. Multiple nested false awakenings have been reported, dreamers waking again and again into what they believe to be reality until they learn to check before trusting the evidence of the room around them. The experience of déjà vu, the uncanny and fleeting sense of having been somewhere before, of having lived through this exact moment already, may involve the same memory systems active during dreaming. One theory holds that déjà vu occurs when the brain's memory retrieval system activates a fragment of memory, perhaps a dream memory, perhaps a forgotten waking memory, perhaps a pattern that simply resembles something stored before the conscious mind can identify its source. The result is a feeling of familiarity without a recoverable memory to explain it, the emotional signal of recognition without the content that normally accompanies it. The moment feels remembered, but the remembering finds nothing when it reaches for what was remembered, and the feeling passes, leaving only the faint echo of somewhere else. Shared dreaming, two people independently reporting the same dream content, has been reported throughout history and across cultures with enough consistency to become a recurring subject of inquiry. Couples have described dreaming of the same location on the same night. Siblings have reported identical nightmare figures appearing without prior discussion. Throughout history, cultures from the Amazon to the highlands of New Guinea have maintained the belief that certain dreams can be shared, that the boundary between sleeping minds is less absolute than the boundary between waking ones. No controlled scientific study has yet verified shared dreaming under conditions that exclude coincidence, suggestion, or selective memory. The evidence remains anecdotal, the phenomenon unconfirmed, but the reports keep arriving, generation after generation, from people who have no apparent reason to fabricate them. The question of whether consciousness continues in some form during dreamless deep sleep, whether there is something it is like to be in that state, some minimal awareness beyond the complete absence that ordinary introspection reports, is one of the genuinely open questions in the science of consciousness. Most people asked about their dreamless sleep report nothing, a blank, a gap, an absence of experience between lying down and waking. But some meditators, particularly those with long practices of mindfulness and sleep, report a thin thread of awareness persisting even into deep sleep. Not a dream, not a thought, simply a quality of presence. Whether this represents genuine consciousness or a retrospective construction of the waking mind is a question that cannot currently be resolved with the tools available. The nature of the sleeping mind in its deepest depths remains, like the dreams themselves, only partially illuminated. Tonight, as your eyes close and your breathing deepens, as the sounds of the waking world soften and recede, your brain will begin the extraordinary process it has carried out every night of your life without instruction or effort. The memories of today are already being sorted, filed, carried from their temporary home to somewhere deeper and more permanent. The emotions that came with them are being gently separated from their original charge, processed and folded into the long archive of a life. And somewhere in the hours ahead, in the long dark between now and morning, a world will begin to assemble itself from the materials of your own experience, familiar and strange at once, governed by its own logic, real in the way that only the dreaming mind can make things real. You will fly, perhaps, or walk through rooms you have never seen, or speak with someone you have missed for a long time. The science of dreams can tell us a great deal about what the brain is doing in those hours, but it cannot tell us what it is like, what it feels like from the inside in your particular sleeping mind, to be you dreaming your particular dreams. That remains yours alone, private, irreducibly personal, one of the last genuinely unexplored territories in the universe of human experience. Sleep now, and let the dreaming begin.